Hypno to Hypno podcast. For more information, visit secretsuccesshypnosis.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hypno to Hypno podcast, where you can learn about hypnosis, hypnotists around the world, and what kind works for you. My name is Johanna Dinsdale, clinical hypnotist and founder of Secret Success Hypnosis Clinic. Today, our guest speaker is the wonderful Clyde Girdham, a qualified clinical hypnotherapist, psychotherapist, crisis support worker, and NLP practitioner. He is the founder of Sydney City Hypnotherapy in Australia. Welcome, Clive.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started.
Well, I used to have a day job. I was actually an engineer, believe it or not. And I found that I was running teams, and I was having to deal with personal issues within the teams. You know, people would come to me with problems. So I went to my HR manager and asked if I could do a counseling course, because I seemed to be doing all the counseling. And they said, no, counseling's got nothing to do with management. Or, you know, it's all about getting the job done. So I put myself on a course myself, and I got very interested in, you know, the psychological aspects of stuff. And eventually I ended up doing a clinical diploma and getting qualified and registered.
That's wonderful. So tell us a little bit about how you personally define hypnosis and what that looks like in Australia.
Okay, so for me, I mean, obviously people are maybe a little bit wary about the word hypnosis. They certainly are here. And but I debunk any problems there. I talk about the different brain levels of consciousness, you know, beta activity, alpha, theta, and delta. So I talk about we experience this range of consciousness throughout the day and night. And when we can get the mind very quiet, which is theta or alpha, then positive and beneficial suggestions just seem to stay there a lot more. And then what I talk to them about is the waking state, when you're just half awake, but not fully rebooted yet. And once I've got them to understand that concept, it just becomes very easy for them just to settle into a very relaxed state of mind. So I guess as part of my preamble with clients, I debunk any myths, and because a lot of people fear losing control, and you know, they might have seen stage shows and things like this. So I just say, look, it's something which, and I actually teach a breathing exercise to get them very calm very quickly. And I said, look, we don't really need to go much further than that. If you can do that, we can do some work. And that overcomes any hurdles at the beginning.
Definitely. So what kind of myths are out there in Australia around hypnosis?
Well, it doesn't exist. there's no such thing. It's actually quite widely accepted. Here we call it hypnotherapy. Mm-hmm. We don't even though I checked on Google, some of the search words are hypnosis. We call ourselves hypnotherapists, and it's actually very well known, especially for things like stop smoking and things like that. So the myths generally tend to be the stereotypes of, you know, watching a clock on a chain, mm-hmm. and turning into a zombie and not waking up and things like that. So, but it's generally quite accepted.
That's great that you're getting the word out there and, you know, correcting these myths that seem to be very common in, you know, the general population. So what client goals would you say are your specialty, or what kind of problems do you work on with your clients?
Okay, well, I tend to work a bit more on the dark side compared to most hypnotherapists, because I've got a drug and alcohol and suicide background in terms of training. I find a lot of hypnotherapists shy away from anyone who's potentially suicidal or has got a heavy drug problem. And they tend to, I get a lot of referrals from other hypnotherapists when somebody like that shows up in their practice. So I tend to do a lot of addictions. So cocaine, which is huge here in Sydney, gambling, where we've got something called the pokey machines, which are slot machines. And they're very, very common, very, very popular with 35-year-old males. I always thought it was an old person's game, you know, sitting there in front of a slot machine. But it's massive among the mid-30s male population. Cocaine, smoking. I've currently seen a heroin user. So some of what some people would consider the darker stuff, but a lot of stuff I help with things like PTSD and phobias as well.
That's wonderful. So what kind of hypnotic techniques do you use with your clients?
Okay, so it depends on what's happening. So with PTSD, I use my version of the rewind, which is an adaptation of the fast phobia cure. And I've actually created what I call the modified rewind. I didn't want to call it something else and then not credit the rewind, but I've put my flavor into it, and that's very successful. I use that a lot because I see a lot of phobias and I see a lot of post-traumatic stress. Other things I do come from NLP. I might use swish patterns, which I found incredibly effective to help with some of the auditory and visual cues that gamblers have with the pokie machines. And I also use a kind of coaching model where it's what I call the physical timeline, where I talk about your current self and moving you to your future self and away from your undesired self. So I actually move people around the room and get them to tell me how they changed. And then I use that within the trance work. So I'm a full believer in like the Ericksonian approach of the client's got all the resources they need, and they've got all the answers to their problems. They just can't see them at the moment.
That's wonderful. So what's the difference between the timeline and the rewind?
Okay, sorry. So rewind is a technique which involves dissociation. So for example, if somebody had been traumatized, then in traditional therapy, they would be talking about it, e.g. associating into it, and what I call picking at the wound. With dissociation, we get them to actually come up with I teach them as if they're seeing it on a screen, but before that trauma ever happened, there's some better situation which happened in their life, and then after the bad situation, there's something good in their life, and you get them to imagine seeing this process like watching a movie in three screens just happening, and then rewinding backwards through it. So that's a mental guided imagery technique. Okay. Whereas the physical timeline is simply that. I get people to stand up on one side of the room and say, right, this is you today. Tell me about you. Grade yourself out of 10. How's life? And, they say 3 out of 10. I say, right, room for improvement. I stand them at the other end of the room and go, right, you're a 7 out of 10 now. Tell me what's happening in your life these days. And then I will get them to think from the point of view of their desired self and tell me what they need to do. So one is very interactive with the client. The other one is more like a guided imagery technique.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I love that you're working with individuals with addiction and definitely like the suicidal thoughts. I think it's so important for those people to have that sort of support system.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm actually a crisis support worker, meaning I'm on a suicide hotline. And
I saw that in your bio on your website. Yeah. That's wonderful.
And I also supervise the people taking the calls, which means that if they have a call which needs an intervention, they call me and I interface with the police. And I also are part of the training team for those people too. So suicide is something which it's a very standard question for me, and it's a question that a lot of people shy away from.
Mm-hmm. And it's great that you're there for those individuals. So walk us through what a first session with you would look like.
Okay, depends on what you're presenting with, but generally someone's presenting with a problem. If it's a phobia, then for me, it's very straightforward. It's very straightforward. I'm just going to do my version of the modified rewind. If it's more along the lines of, it could be any addiction, I will start with on the very first session, doing my 5-minute coaching model, finding out who they are, what are their values, their limiting beliefs, what life is like at the moment, understanding a bit more holistically about them. And then again, I'll do my physical timeline thing with them, where I'll get all the content I need, because I don't know how many sessions they're going to need. But if they're telling me, oh, I need to do this and I need to do this, and then I've also got this problem, then I'm thinking, okay, well, we're not going to get all that done today, but let's focus on one thing And then maybe this other stuff is content for future sessions. So I always start with my physical timeline to gather as much information as possible. I'm heavy into values. So I'll ask people, what's important to you? Tell me the top five things, because I work with what we call value violations. So if someone values freedom and security and intimacy, yet they're stuck in a job they hate, they're in a bad relationship, and they've got no money coming in, then clearly they're going to be anxious or upset in some way. So I try to understand what people's values set are, so that I can identify what probably the root cause of their underlying condition is, especially if it's depression or anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Now, you are also a psychotherapist, which is wonderful that you have that combination of skills. How often would you say do you use hypnosis versus psychotherapy?
I think pretty much every session. Sometimes people are very happy just to talk, and I say, look, I'm quite cheeky with them during the session. I say, look, I've done nothing. You've just been talking. I mean, has this been useful? Mm-hmm. And I always end the session, well, was this useful for you? Because if they say no, and they, one or two in 1,000 might, then I'll say, oh, that's okay. I'm not going to charge you. But if somebody wants just to offload, which sometimes is important. I had a client yesterday who, she goes, oh, I've never really had a chance to talk about this before. And now that I've spoken to you about it and you've reflected back to me, I can really see why. So sometimes they just want to come in for change. They don't care how they get it. And if I see an opportunity, but generally I would say 95% of the time we'll do some hypnosis.
Wow. Yeah, it's really interesting because in Canada, we can have hypnotists that aren't psychotherapists, whereas I know some locations in the United States, even some provinces in Canada, only psychotherapists can use hypnosis. Do you see any disadvantages by not having training in psychotherapy with hypnosis?
Yeah, definitely. Because the quality of training varies so widely here in Australia. Mm-hmm. You can get a weekend certificate. You can do a quit in 60 minutes smoking course and just focus just on smoking and none of the other problems. You could do what I did, which was pretty much a 12-month diploma and in psychotherapy and also hypnosis, where you learn modern psychotherapy, which including cognitive behavior therapy, including, many, many different approaches. So for me, it's having got that background, I feel like I'm more tooled up, for want of a better word, to deal with most problems. So I highly recommend people just keep training and just keep getting more information, especially outside of just hypnosis. And I think things like cognitive behavior therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy and some of those other therapies are really, really useful. Mm-hmm. And then you can blend it. What I do is I tend to blend if I pick up a cognitive distortion while I'm talking to somebody, black and white thinking or minimizations or all that sort of stuff, what I'll do is I'll somehow weave that into the hypnosis process. So being able to spot some of the thinking errors, for want of a better word, and then utilize that within the hypnosis is really powerful.
Ooh, could you give us an example of a time that you've done that?
Oh yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, so sometimes people are like, for example, say someone's overcautious. All right, so they're magnifying problem. They're doing what we call a poor risk assessment. They're thinking something's possible rather than probable. Yeah, and so. In hypnosis, I'll be saying such things as like, yeah, it's true. A plane could crash right into this building right now. It's possible, but it's not probable. So each and every time in the past, when you thought about this, now you'll begin to assess the shades of gray between the black and white, all this sort of stuff. So in that case, what I'm doing is I'm countering black and white thinking, which is all or nothing. Plus, I'm giving them the opportunity to actually consider different options and not become anxious about something that's never going to happen. So all the time, effectively.
Interesting. So in Sydney, I think you were talking about how people could actually get certified with just like a small, like few hour course.
Yeah, look, the certification. I'm a clinical member of a organization, and to become a member of the organization, you have to have a certain government approved qualification. So that's one layer above, some of the other training that people have. So I can happily call myself a clinical hypnotherapist because I'm a registered clinical hypnotherapist. Reminds me, I've got to fill in my CPD card this year. So I'm confident that I've reached a level of reached a certain standard by an organization that's to a point where I can actually, I'm able to give private health fund rebates. Now, and that course, I don't know, what did it cost me? 10,000 Australian, sometimes the 15,000. So it's an investment. Now, before I did that course, I was working for 6 years because I was self-trained. And I'd do online courses. I would read stuff. I would practice with friends. And so for 6 years, I hadn't any formal training. And having no formal training means you're probably not going to get any registration with anybody, which means you're not going to get any insurance, which means you're very exposed. So in terms of answer your question, yeah, there's a range of training that people get, and the term "I am a clinical hypnotherapist" gets thrown around quite a lot. And as a clinical hypnotherapist, I look at that and go, okay, sure. But people can still do good work with people can do very, very good work without all the high-level qualifications.
It's very similar over here. So it's not government regulated. It's basically you could, like, if I wanted to, I could start my own, become a hypnotist. We can't call it hypnotherapy over here. It's just one of the laws. It's just simply clinical hypnosis.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting how it's so varied over the world, what qualifies as hypnosis, who can practice hypnosis. Yeah, I'm really diving into that. I've interviewed a lot of people over the world. You're my 8th. So yeah, definitely. So can you tell us what the future of your practice looks like?
Well, I see one-on-one clients, but I also run online training with other hypnotherapists. I've run face-to-face workshops throughout Australia and New Zealand on teaching hypnotherapists. So part of my, I see one-on-one clients to stay with my foot in the door and keep sharp. Yeah. And I enjoy it. I've got a very nice office just down the street from me. And if that dried up tomorrow because of the coronavirus, I'd be fine because I've got all my online stuff as well. So I see myself continuing with the one-on-one clients, but a little bit more discriminatory, is that the word? Because I don't want to be busy seeing one-on-one clients. I like to, when I see a client that I really get on with, I really enjoy it. When I see somebody who drains my energy, I can't do this. So I'm a bit more selective with who I see. That keeps me sharp and on top of things. But I'm going to continue to develop more and more online training. So for example, I've got a group right now, I've got nearly 40 people in it. I'm teaching how to create products because I've created a lot of products in my time. And I can see right now it's an ideal time to be thinking about how to create a product and generate some other income. And I really enjoy teaching. So I can see myself doing more and more of that. And hopefully when the restrictions, lift, I can get back to running workshops because I really enjoy teaching and training and stuff. So yeah, more of that. I also want to do a podcast.
Oh, well, you're doing one right now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
what would it be on?
Oh, I've got this, because it will be a bit cheeky. It would be It would be about hypnotherapy and business, but I would make sure I've just got to come up with the questions to make sure it's entertaining, and I just want to. It's something weird and wonderful in the hypnotherapy world.
Well, I can't wait. I'm looking forward to when you release that. Keep me updated.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining our podcast. Could you just let everyone know if they want to learn more information, where they could contact you?
Okay, I've got a number of websites. Okay, so, well, as you know, my name is Clive Girdham. Okay, so there it is. So I've got clivegirdham.com. And I've also got clive.com.au. And there's a lot of information on both of those. I haven't included my Sydney City Hypnotherapy because that's just really that's for people wanting to go get therapy here in Sydney. But they can check that out too if they want.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you stay safe and have a great weekend.
Thanks very much. You're very welcome, and you too.